Hello, everyone. Just drop a message into the chat if you can hear my voice okay. Just want to make sure that everyone joining can hear me. Amazing. Perfect. We'll just let a few more people come in to the webinar today, and then we will kick off. So drop a message into the chat. Let me know where you are joining in from. From in the country, we're in London based, but let me know where you are joining in from. Windsor, for Lisa's from Windsor. Amazing. London, Twickenham, close by. Shropshire, lovely place. Woking, Stratfordshire, Dorset, amazing. Cool. Well, really appreciate everyone joining in today, and excited to present what's coming up to be our first quarterly submission, August 7th. This webinar is all about that and how to do that, specifically in Landlord Studio and the mistakes to avoid, etc. So just a quick introduction. My name's Logan Ransley, co-founder here at Landlord Studio. Glad you've joined me today. The first deadline for MTD is coming up in a little over 2 weeks. So if you've found yourself panicking a little bit, maybe you feel like you've left it too late, or you're maybe confused about what you need to do, going to be trying to put many of those worries to rest in this session. So let's jump into it. Here's a quick breakdown of what we're going to be covering today, specifically around MTD. So the first is how to register for MTD, plus a quick overview of how it works. This is really key because unless you've registered for MTD, Making Tax Digital, on the HMRC website, ultimately your software, whatever software you're using, won't be able to connect to your account, your HMRC account. So that's the first step. Then choosing your HMRC software to make that submission. The biggest MTD myths, getting the expense categories right, and then ultimately consequences of missing that deadline. But just before we dive in today, quick note on how it will work. I'll have a live Q&A session towards the end of the webinar, so please drop in questions as we go. And just a quick disclaimer, while we live and breathe property management and accounting here at Landlord Studio, I'm not a qualified tax advisor or lawyer, so today's session is just purely educational, for educational purposes based on our understanding of the latest HMRC government guidance. So if you have specific questions on your circumstance, you should definitely speak with an accountant particularly. Without further ado, so let's just start with a quick recap. MTD went live 6th of April. If you're in wave 1, meaning your combined gross qualifying income from rental properties and or self-employment is £50,000 and above, you are now required to keep digital records and submit quarterly updates to HMRC. And then wave 2 drops to £30,000, and then wave 3 drops to a further £20,000. So again, just want to be really clear on what qualifying income is. This is where most of the questions come. Qualifying income is gross income. Doesn't have anything to do with the expenses. It is how much rent you are effectively charging. If you generate £50,000 in rent from your tenants across your property or properties, that is the number that HMRC looks at. It is not the amount you charge then minus the fees or expenses. This is the top level number. MTD doesn't include anything related to PAYE salary, pensions, dividends, savings. It's purely just the rental income that you are generating and or self-employment income added together. So if you are self-employed as well, comes into that. So if you're expecting to generate 32,000 in rent and 22,000 as a sole trader, your qualifying income is 54,000 pounds. You meet the threshold. You'll also note the 7th of August deadline, which is very soon if you qualify ultimately. So just one more thing I want to be really clear about. Quarterly updates are not tax returns, and you do not pay tax when you submit them. They are a summary of your property income and expenses for the period. What that means is basically for landlords who've maybe been putting this off and now are realizing 7th of August is in 2 weeks. Here's what you should do first. Most importantly, register for MTD, choose your recognized software, and then ensure that you don't put off tracking all of the income and expenses in the product. I'll pop in a few links for the chat for where you can register for HMRC and where you can find recognized software. I'll pop them in now. Here's a couple of links you can go check out afterwards. And it's basically all the instructions on how to get set up for HMRC, how to choose software, etc. But I'm very keen to see what the audience is feeling like. How prepared do you feel for this first quarterly submission coming up? For those that are coming into MTD particularly, let me know in the chat. How prepared do you feel for the first quarterly submission on a scale of 1 to 5? Let me know, because I think some people have got it all sorted, some don't. Let me know in the chat, and it will give me some good guidance on how to tailor some of the content as we go through the session today. So yeah, drop the number in the chat, 1 to 5. How are you feeling? Not prepared at all, up to very prepared. Cool. Seeing a lot of 2s, a lot of 3s, some 0s, a lot of 2s, 3s. So about sort of halfway. I think, as you do the first quarterly submission, it's going to become a lot easier. Ultimately, the process is fairly straightforward. So I want to sort of cover off what that means, what's actually involved. Like I said earlier, you need to be registered for MTD with HMRC before using software. If you're using an accountant, they can also register on your behalf. Chat with an accountant, they'll be able to help. A common issue we're seeing is landlords signing up to the software first, and this is why I bring this up. But you can't link your HMRC account to software until the registration is done. So you need to go and actually register first. Once that's set up, then the software can then be integrated into your HMRC account. And the quarterly update is just a summary, again, of a rental income and allowable expenses for the first 3 months, this 3-month period. Again, you're not submitting every receipt. You're just giving HMRC a total for each category. So total rent received, total repairs, total maintenance, total letting agent fees, so on. Think of it as a condensed profit and loss for the quarter. And one thing that catches people out, quarterly updates are cumulative. So basically each submission is a running year-to-date total, not just the 3 months in isolation. So if you spot an error in quarter 1, you don't need to file an amendment. You just correct the underlying record and it flows through automatically. It's also important to highlight what does not go into your quarterly update. This is things like bank interest, dividends, pensions, income, capital gains. So none of that sort of stuff. Quarterly updates are your property and or self-employment business income and expenses that are associated with that business or property. Everything else just comes in at the end of year, which is called the final declaration. And a question we get a lot, what if my records aren't fully up to date either? Can I still submit? So yes, you can. You can still submit. But the sooner you get your records current, the less work there is later on to amend those records throughout the year. So I'm going to go through a really quick live demo of how Landlord Studio works for Making Tax Digital. Let me just jump across into my Landlord Studio account. Should be able to see it in here. So again, once you are set up for HMRC, again, you have to do that through HMRC. Once your account is set up, then you're ready to go with integrating your software into HMRC for MTD. So for Landlord Studio, it's just 3 easy steps. Basically, you just come in here and then you can effectively authorize your account via HMRC. We need the national insurance number in order to do this, and it goes via the HMRC gateway. So once you've authorized that, then now Landlord Studio has a one-to-one connection between HMRC. The second aspect is important for owners and joint ownership, particularly. So if you've got joint owners in the Landlord Studio product or just generally across your portfolios, one thing you can do is ultimately set ownership at a property level. This is going to help you ultimately do your tax submission correctly, but also do multi-tax submission, which means that you can actually file for each one of these owners on this property from one account. So if you've got Landlord Studio already, just jump into the contact section inside the properties, jump into the owners, and then you can set your ownership split. Really easy. Do that for every property. So if you've got a list of properties, make sure you're setting that up for every property correctly. And that will allow you to then take you into the next step. So jumping back to HMRC integration, once you've set up your HMRC integration, so you've gone through the steps to link your HMRC account to Landlord Studio, what you can then do for this particular HMRC account is link that to a particular owner. So you've set those owners up at a property level. Now you can actually link this particular account to that owner. And then what happens is each owner then has a share of the properties. So let me go into that a little bit more deeply. So let's jump across into one of the owners. This is a national insurance number here. So I've authorized this national insurance number. This is your HMRC gateway account. Basically, this is that particular user, but then you can see I've actually set up other 3 ones in here. So this means you can actually file the quarterly submissions for, in this case, is 4 different people that I can actually file quarterly submissions for. I'm just going to focus on this one to begin with. So what we do is we link that particular national insurance number, that is your HMRC account. We link that to a particular owner in the system. So again, the ownership's done at a property level. I can basically link that owner, and now I've got my whole Making Tax Digital submission here for this particular owner with all the correct splits. So this is all the properties associated with this particular user, but also broken down by every percentage split. And this is where you just won't find this in other software like Xero or Sage or Intuit, other accounting software. Basically, each property now has a percentage split associated with my account here. Now, I can add new owners in here or switch users. So again, this is one of the biggest value and biggest benefits of using Landlord Studios. You can file for multiple people from one account, which makes tracking income and expenses for a property level and percentage, and the percentage of ownership just a lot easier. Maybe you're a husband and wife. You can basically use one Landlord Studio account to file for both husband and wife separately, whilst taking into consideration all that percentage of ownerships. So what we do then is we basically generate the statements every quarter. As you log income and expenses in Landlord Studio throughout the year, basically we then take all the figures. So you can see this owner on the right-hand side. This quarterly submission, again, is for this national insurance number, which is connected to this owner. So Nina is this person. We generate the quarterly statement, which is all the income and expenses from all these properties, and then divided by or calculated based on the ownership percentage structure here. So what that means is your income, your expenses from all these properties are determined based on this percentage structure over here, which allows us to say that this amount of income and this amount of expenses was generated for you particularly. And this is how we handle the whole joint ownership structure. All you need to do is just review this information. You can dive into it a little bit deeper if you want to. So you can see there I've gone into each of these categories, and then I can see what those categories are actually made up from. So travel costs, for instance, there's a bunch of expenses that have been added in there on each property. Basically, those figures are aggregated under these categories. And so now, me as a landlord, based on this generation summary here, this is my taxable income and expenses for this quarter, which is due 7th of August. So all I need to do is just review this data and then one click submit through to HMRC. Done. That's it. Basically, you add your properties, you add the ownership structure, you connect your HMRC account, and then you review the quarterly submissions in here. And then you can fire that straight off to HMRC in a couple of clicks. So I'm just going to go through a few questions. I know they're coming through in the chat here, just so that we are covering this off. So let me just go through and we'll just do a couple of questions. Do joint owners need to use the same software? No, technically not. You can use multiple different software for MTD. However, this is just a much easier way to do that. Is this doable on Android? Yes, so you can do this across web, iPhone, or Android. Can you name other owners just by name, not national insurance number? So as long as you've set up the owners in the system here, you can see Nina is associated with this national insurance number. That's basically the name being assigned to that. It's good. Can you split organization expenses between owners like telephone and internet? Yes. So see the organization name under Nina. That's basically top level expenses, non-property related, but more higher level ones. Again, you can define that percentage at the org level, which also allows you to do all that split ownership stuff as well. Mortgage interest just sits under a category called mortgage interest. It's typically excluded out of the MTD submission because mortgage interest is non-tax deductible from my understanding. Again, there is a way to filter out categories in the submission as well. You can do that from inside the integrations actually. So if you jump across into here, there's actually a category mapping system here. So if you jump into the mapping, then basically the Landlord Studio categories on the left are ones that you can set up and that we set up automatically. These are the basically expense categories that you use to track transactions. They're ultimately mapped across into HMRC making tax digital filing categories over here. So it means that if you're, tracking things like principal on mortgage, which is ultimately not an expense, it's a loan, you can then just exclude it out of here. So anything that you track on principal doesn't then flow through to HMRC. So basically, in summary, the best thing to do is just jump into this integrations menu here, jump into the Making Tax Digital. There's a full guide on the right-hand side here. Go through the process there. But it's a 3 sort of step process. Authorize your HMRC account, link to the owner that you set up in the system or owners, and then check the category tax mapping in here. If you don't change any of the categories, by default, it is set up per default settings. And then jump into our help chat down here if you have any further questions on that. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an understanding about how to use Landlord Studio's Making Tax Digital submission feature. It's fairly straightforward. Ultimately, it allows you to do everything from one place, therefore allowing you to do those submissions for you and also others as well. So just to sort of summarize, again, connecting directly to HMRC, jump on the HMRC website to figure out how to register. And then just want to cover off the final declaration as well. So we've been sort of focusing on the quarterly submissions on this demo part, but ultimately the final declaration is the end piece, which is the end of year tax return. It basically replaces your traditional self-assessment tax return. So this is where all the other income is included: bank interest, dividends, pension income, employment income. All that stuff is then included in the end of the year. This is where you bring in everything to calculate your full tax position for the year. Now, the final declaration is due 31st of January. We'll support this inside Landlord Studio, so you'll be able to do final declaration inside Landlord Studio. However, we do recommend using an accountant for doing the end of year tax return, because ultimately they will bring in everything else into the software, into their software to do a tax, the final tax submission ultimately. Not all MTD software does handle this final declaration. Landlord Studio handles the full MTD workflow. The final declaration you'll see closer to the end of the tax year available for you to actually use. And then, one of the questions on whether you do need an accountant, if you have a straightforward portfolio of properties, no complex assets and investments and income, you could probably handle all of that yourself inside Landlord Studio. But this is where we recommend to actually go and use an accountant, because ultimately, doing your own taxes when you've got a complex structure can be a little bit, iffy on that. So, that's just to sort of summarize, how it works, how to do the Making Tax Digital component. Just want to cover off a few other things as well. So a question we get a lot is, do I have to learn a whole new set of expense categories for MTD? Basically the categories are the same as the self-assessment tax return form. If you've ever done your own tax return form, those categories are the same in Landlord Studio. It's basically mapping to the same sort of process. And then just a couple of myths and misconceptions. People think it's a mini tax return, these quarterly submissions. It's not a tax return. It's a summary. It's just a posting of, where you are in the year. It's not an actual tax return, therefore you're not paying tax each time you're doing this. MTD applies to every landlord, so no, it doesn't. It's qualifying income. Again, you got to work out your qualifying income position based on all your properties, all your self-employment income, and your joint ownership as well. Yeah. And then, a lot of people think it's based on profit. No, it's not based on profit. It's based on the gross income. Limited company properties count in this. So this is an important thing. If you have properties in a limited company, they're not under this Making Tax Digital for income tax. They're excluded. Making Tax Digital is only applicable to privately owned or personally owned properties. Those limited companies ultimately sit under the corporation tax, which is separate. So just make sure you are setting that up correctly in the system. Again, use the ownership feature to determine, which is personal, which is not. And then, some people think that you just need an accountant for all of this. Not necessarily. We do advise to use one. However, if you've got a more simple portfolio, then you can just use the software to do everything. So what actually happens if you miss 7th of August deadline? Again, for this first year, HMRC is running a soft landing. It means that you won't pick up penalty points for a late quarterly update. So if you are behind, don't panic. I know there is somebody has said, can we do a practice year in advance? If you're not we're not advising you to push wrong figures in. We're not advising you to get around this, but ultimately don't panic if you don't get it right this year, because the penalty points are not applicable this year. And then also, if you're not in this year's first wave, then use this as an opportunity to practice, because you can still do it. You can still post the figures to HMRC and learn the process regardless if you are in the first wave or not. That's just sort of two things to cover off. But the main sort of point here is that the final declaration, which is the end of year tax return, this is not included in the soft landing. That has to be correct. The quarterly submissions are not, they're in the soft landing approach. The final declaration, which is the end of year tax return, is not. So that needs to be correct. All the figures that go into the end of year tax return needs to be correct. And then sort of finally, the grace period ends from next year. So going into next year's submission, basically each late update is 1 point, a penalty point. 4 points triggers a £200 penalty, which is applied. So our advice is build the habit now. If you aren't in the first wave, use the opportunity to still use the product and post updates to learn how it all works. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of information and a little bit of idea on how the whole thing works. If you're looking for more information to clarify your knowledge and understanding, we've put together a resource hub on MTD. Just scan the QR code here or jump on our website. Right in the top of the menu bar is a MTD hub link. Go in there. There's calculators. There's all sorts of resources as well. There's also got a MTD report. So this is a report that we've run across the industry. Quite interesting. Definitely go check that out. It's on our website as well, and the MTD hub too. So interesting sort of reporting that we've done on that. So I'm going to come to the end of the webinar. Going to do a short Q&A to wrap up today's session, and then we will finish up today as well. So let me just go through the list, post any questions if I haven't covered any particularly, and I'll do my best to go through them all. But if you do have any specific tax questions, accounting questions for your particular scenario, I can't answer them. I'm not a tax professional. Go speak with an accountant, as they will be able to help as well. Alrighty, let's go through. 50K limit applies to each owner. Yes, it does. So each individual person is for the threshold. Let's go through again. Do I need to scan all the receipts for my expenses? So MTD doesn't require you to scan receipts, but HMRC requires you to have invoices and receipts on file for 7 years, I believe, just as a general business requirement. So use the software for that as well. Would recommend you registering now and just testing it out. It will mean that when you're going into next year's submissions, you know exactly how it works. Let's go through. So we'll be able to, on this particular question, are you or anyone available if I have any problems with MTD before sending? We'll be able to assist with the integration part. We won't be able to assist with saying whether, your income and tax is correct, for instance. So those are accountant tax questions. We'll be able to assist with saying, the actual integration part, posting the updates, etc. What we do is a software company, ultimately. Let's have a look. Answered a few of these. Do we need to include employment income? No, you don't need to include employment income on MTD filing. It needs to come in the final end of year declaration, though. Again, this is another one, £20,000 pension. Pension is not qualifying income for Making Tax Digital. Rental income and self-employment income is. Will the quarterly submissions naturally roll up for the final declaration? So yes. So when you post these updates to HMRC is essentially their source of truth now. That's where all their information is. So when you do your final declaration, what happens is the software will see the cumulative figures that you've been posting throughout the year, and that will roll into the end of year final declaration submission. There's a few questions on the sole trade side. So we don't support this right now. We are planning to support this. It's just not currently in the product. You'll likely see this available in the next couple of months. We're aiming sort of end of year for this. Why are they how to split Schedule E among each owner? Schedule E is not related to this at this point. Schedule E is a different part of the product, so that's not related to Making Tax Digital. I'll take one more question and then I'm going to wrap up. But yeah, I would definitely recommend reaching out to an accountant to get a little bit more, even just doing a sort of one-off consultant. See if you don't plan to use an accountant going forward. Just have the conversation with them. They'll allow you to ultimately just figure out exactly the process and what you need to track. And then that will allow you to then go in and potentially do your own stuff going forward. Will your software be able to add pension income or interest by the end of the year? So yes, that will be in the final declaration. Final declaration will come in closer to the end of the year when you do your tax return. It'll be available in the product. And I'll take one more question. yeah, most of these questions are all around qualifying income and whether pension income is included and all that sort of stuff. So again, just want to reiterate, employment income is not in this, only self-employment. So if you're a sole trader, if you're self-employed, that's considered income in MTD, and rental income as well. So not PAYE income. I'll just show this one. We're going to send out a replay after this. Yeah, you'll see all the information coming out in the next couple of days post this webinar. Cool. So I'm going to wrap up today's session. Again, would encourage you to go and chat with a tax and accounting professional if you have questions on your particular situation, regardless if you plan to use them going forward. Still just do the one-off consultation. It will help you just understand where you sit and how you need to actually report all these things. Try us out for free for 14 days as well. You can jump straight into the product, test it out, and actually see if it's going to work for you. Some of those demo parts that I've showed you before is how the MTD component works. There's a lot of other features in there, from open banking to the multi-user to the mobile app to tracking all the expenses and income at a property level. Lots of features in there to help you stay on top of everything. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully it's been helpful. Really appreciate you joining us today. Again, if you know that you're in MTD's first wave, then jump in, get registered, and then get signed up. Start doing those quarterly submissions from the 7th of August. Complete that. And we wish you all the best with the MTD journey. We're going to be doing other webinars going forward. So look out for those webinars as we announce them. So again, reach out to us at help@landlordstudio.com or inside the product too, and we'll be more than happy to help. So appreciate everyone joining in today. And all the best.